Welcome to St. Brendan's Church in the east side of Tarbert. Although we're on the other side of the town, this church still maintains the old name of Kilnocton. So officially this is St. Brendan's Church Kilnocton. And the church has been standing since 1814. I think many of you know it from the Christmas carols that have been a tradition here. So if you've not been in this church before, I hope you'll enjoy looking at it on this poetry reading, and that sometime in the future that you'll come back and have a look at the church. It's a living place of worship, and there's a congregation here in normal times every second Sunday. I hope you enjoy our presentation.
Thank you very much for that very warm, kind welcome, Reverend Canon Patrick Comerford, and welcome everybody to what is now our 9th poetry reading here in St. Brendan's Church of Ireland here in Tarbert. And we have a lovely programme today, full of surprises as always maybe, and we'll tell you about that as we go along. So I'm going to start today with and straight into a poem called "The Guest House" by that wonderful 13th century poet, Persian poet Rumi. And it's a poem for me that it's a metaphor, of course. But today, you know, we're in God's guest house here on the Steeple Road in Tarbert. We're overlooking the familiar and beautiful site that is the Shannon Estuary, and all of our readings to date have been around the lower of the Shannon Estuary, and really here is no different for me anyway. As I said, the beautiful poem using the metaphor of the guest house, it's used quite a lot in wellness and well-being scenarios. It's one I know that my good friends in the States have a lovely called a guest house for addiction and trauma related, and this is one of the poems that hangs up over there, or in their guest house. So we set out about doing all of this back in, as I said, 9 or 10 weeks ago now. We've now gone 100 days since COVID hit the world, and I just looked in this morning at some of the figures, and COVID has had over 8 million people affected directly by it. Over 4 million people have recovered from it to date, and as of this morning, 443,960 people died from it. So I think that always, it's a great, what I would say, calming is the word, impact on me. We're doing really well. We're heading towards coming out of the lockdown here in Ireland and heading towards phase 3 on the 29th of June. We're here, 5 of us today, all socially distanced and distancing, and all following the guidelines. So what's the world we like today, do you know? And I was this morning, for example, and we woke this morning to the death of Detective Garda Colm Harkin in Castlerea in County Roscommon last night, the 89th member of our Garda force to die in the line of duty for the people of Ireland. Our thoughts and prayers are very much with him, his family, and indeed his comrades today. We're in challenging times. The world is full of many challenges. We have racism again in the forefront of our lives. And for me, like suicide and self-harm, it eats away at my soul and my spirit. So it's good to be here in one of God's own guest houses, sheltering in this beautiful, wonderful oasis that is Tarbert, Shannon Estuary, with and it's of calm and a reflection in itself. It's and I just like to thank again, Reverend Canon Patrick Comerford, for the warm fellowship welcome we received today. I know we have chatted many times since Patrick arrived here, and I always leave him much in a better place after our exchanges and the mutual respect and parities of esteem that comes with that type of interchange. Anyway, as I said, I'll say no more. I'm going to give you the poem. It was translated, this one was translated by a man called Coleman Barks, the Central Rumi, and it's called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if you're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep out your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honourably. He may be cleaning you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So that's the guest house. And I'm going to, gives me a great pleasure to introduce our next poet. She's from Tarbert, born here, and her name is Amanda Elizabeth Ann Friel, and a native of Tarbert. A Shan Van who creates healing poetry and multi-dimensional mindfulness. Her inspiration always comes from nature, her ancestors, and the land of Ireland. Poetry, according to Amanda, is an activation of the journey within, and her own journey of health and well-being is weaved through her poetry. Amanda assists people on their journey to their well-being. I'm delighted to welcome Amanda back into Tarbert for today. She came all the way from Tralee, where I'm very happy to know that I actually know 4 generations, starting with her granddad, Pacho, her mum herself, and later on the next generation. Her poetry crosses all those generations today, so I know Amanda has a nice poem which she is going to recite for us.
Thank you very much, Paddy. So this poem is called For My Grandfather Paddy O'Keefe, and on the evening that he passed away, on the 9th of January of this year, 2020, these words channeled in as I stood in my garden, and I could sense and feel his rite of passage as he was leaving his physical body and moving in to the next spiritual body. And there's also a link between my nan, Eileen Keane, in the poem as well. And I really feel this is for people at the moment as well who are missing grandparents, missing grandchildren, and it's from the heart. When I witness a morning sky and a night sky like this, it makes everything more precious. I knew when I saw the snow on the Kerry mountains early this morning. From my window, I saw the crows take flight. The quiet blackbird with his orange beak, reminding me to stay opening. The tiny little daffodil, one shy from the night's frost, opening, doing his best to see the first daffodil of spring, will always be a reminder. For it's a day of great sadness, great joy, a day of relief. a morning that so quietly turned into evening, opening the heavens to another dear and precious soul. It's an evening that turns into night, the brightest, biggest full moon shining down, gleaming, streaming, releasing, opening, letting go. One star twinkles, one light exits. Two lights shine, two loves reunited. Trasna Daunta over the hills, singing August dancing. Happy days, singing the 40 shades of green. For the young ones now will be growing up wiser, stronger, more creative. The turf will burn. The sun will rise again. The night sky will return. It will never be the same. The music will return. The mountains will sing. The wind will be the communication of all the stories. For I have a heart that's opening, hands that are teaching, feet that are earthed, eyes gleaming of blue, hair of silver, lips so tender, kissing goodbye. It's not the end. It's the beginning of another cycle. I stand on the land releasing, full to capacity. For now I surrender to the glow of the shiny wolf moon. I am full, overflowing with love, opening. It's the day when the sod of turf will burn without you. The candle will keep on lighting. The generation now and the next generation will gather, will remember. Poetry will flow, songs will be sung, laughter will be heard. For you're the brightest character I knew. Love you so much, Grandad Padjo. Rest gently. Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful, Amanda. Very moving, and what can I say, in your reference to grandparents and being in that category myself, and being 100 days, I think now, and over 100 days since I saw either of my kids or my grandkids. It's tough, isn't it, really? But I do think that coming together like we do, like this, and that kind of sharing of emotions, it's just really helpful. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our host really for today, Reverend Canon Patrick Comerford. He was born in Rathfarnham. We were chatting on the way here in Dublin because I lived quite close to that for quite a number of years in Rathgar, and he says he was born and lived between the synagogue, a laundry, and opposite the cinema in Rathfarnham. So what a better place to start your life. He lived in Waterford, in school near Drogheda. He spent many important years in Lichfield, and then went to Wexford. I think he has a fondness for the guys in Wexford and the girls in Wexford. First trained as a surveyor, but spent over 30 years of his working life as a journalist, first with the Lichfield Mercury, then the Wexford People, and then the Irish Times. Was foreign desk editor of the Irish Times for the last years that he was there. He has been a lecturer at the Church of Ireland Theological Institute for 15 years. He moved to the Red Keel group of parishes in January 2017, and hence here in Tarbert and why we met. He has studied theology in Trinity College, Dublin, the Irish School of Ecumenics in Maynooth, and in Cambridge. Married to Barbara in 1974 and has 2 adult children. I think one of his many interests, I was reading there, listed in the sport of rowing, and I must say he has a shared interest with our musician today, which I'll tell you more about, who's also the youngest we've ever had on this poetry reading. But more about that, and I'm going to hand you over now to Patrick Comerford.
Thank you, Paddy. I just thought I'd share some stories as we're here about some of my predecessors. I arrived here in 2017 without any real experience of County Limerick or County Kerry, except for being at rugby matches in Thomond Park and spending a summer in 1966 in the Kerry Gaeltacht trying to improve my Irish in advance of what was then called the Intercert. And I've been interested to know who my predecessors here were. It's a bit like wanting to know who were the people who lived in your present house and who lived there in the past. Some of them have been very curious and eccentric. None of them fits the role model or the stereotypical image of a Church of Ireland priest. Some of them were Green Gaelic and Irish in the best sense of the word. Some of them came from very peculiar backgrounds, and one of them was a complete eccentric. And he had the grand name of the Reverend Sir William Augustus Woolsey. Now you might know the name Woolsey from the Woolsey car. It was invented by one member of his family, and the Woolsey was a very famous, stylish car in its day. And the man who invented it, Frederick York Woolsey, was also a brother of Field Marshal Woolsey, who was one of the great generals in the British Army in the 19th century, and there's a monument to him in St. Patrick's Cathedral, Dublin, and he spent his last days in the Royal Hospital in Kilmainham. So they were a family that was integrated into church life, into commercial life, and into military life in Ireland in the 19th century. I was interested in coming across his name when I arrived here because there's a peculiar connection between the Woolsey family and the Comerford family that goes back to Lichfield, and although we're not related, there are some very interesting family connections that are too boring to talk about today. But William Augustus Woolsey was an interesting person in himself. He went to school to a famous school in Rathmines that was regarded as being a great place for training potential clergy in the Church of Ireland. He then went on to Trinity, where he was a distinguished student, winning a number of prizes, and then he was ordained for the Church of Ireland by the Archbishop of Dublin at the time, who was Lord Plunkett, on behalf of the Bishop of Limerick and Ardfert. And he could have expected that he was going to have a very successful career. He came from a family, his grandfather was a Church of Ireland priest. There were a number of cathedral deans and archdeacons and senior figures in the Church of Ireland like that. So it must have been a disappointment to him that he got nowhere when he came to the Kilnocton group of parishes. He may have lived in the rectory in Tarbert, although by the time of the 1901 census, he was living at Rusheen in Ballylongford. He was a curate for 18 years. He never got a parish of his own. He was never made a rector. He was never made a canon. He was never considered for being a dean or an archdeacon, certainly never for being a bishop. And so after 18 years of living here, and he seems to have done very little, he only appears once in the baptismal records for having baptized a child. He supplemented his income by teaching in the Hewitson family household, and eventually after 18 years here, he moved to West Australia in 1906. And then he came back to these islands in 1920 or 1921, and once again all he could do was get a job as a curate. He never got a parish of his own, and eventually he was retired with just permission to officiate in the Diocese of Durham. And then he found a parish in Lincolnshire in 1932. He was at the age of 67, a year younger than I am, and probably regarded as being a little bit too old for moving into a parish on his own. And surprisingly, in 1933, he inherited the title of baronet from a very distant cousin. One cousin after another in a very difficult family tree to disentangle, one cousin after another had died without having a son to inherit the title. And the title was associated with Mount Wolsey. Some of you may know it. It's outside Tullow. It's a famous golf resort and wedding venue and hotel. But by then, the estate had been sold off. The lands had been sold off. It had been turned into a college by the patrician brothers. And there was nothing else to go with the title except the right to put the word Sir in front of your first name. And nobody in the village in Lincolnshire knew that the Reverend William Wolsey had become the Reverend Sir William Wolsey until one day the butcher knocked at the kitchen door and there was no answer in the vicarage. So he shouted out, "Butcher, Mrs. Wolsey!" Again there was no reply and he shouted out once more, "Butcher, Mrs. Wolsey!" And then there was a timid reply from upstairs. "Lady Wolsey, if you please." Australian newspapers picked up on the report that this eccentric man had become, that he had become a baronet. There wasn't much else of an inheritance. And they described him as being a rather eccentric clergyman, notorious wherever he went, for the prodigious rate at which he preached. I don't know if that means that he preached a lot of sermons or that he just preached too quickly and too fast. It doesn't show in the parish records. But he became the 11th baronet and he retired from parish ministry in 1942 when he was in his late 70s and died at the age of 84 in 1950. There was no inheritance to go with it. And it was interesting as I looked to see where did he get the title. The previous cousin who had held the title was known as Sir Dick Wolsey. He was the baronet before him, the 10th baronet. And Sir Dick, knowing that there was nothing to come back to, had worked all his life as an elevator boy in an hotel in America. And when Sir William died, he had no children to pass on the title to, and it was inherited by another distant cousin. This cousin was working as a cobbler outside Liverpool and cycled to work every day, and nobody knew that he was coming into the title until his mother saw a report in the newspapers. And so Garnet Wolsey became a baronet, although he was on a weekly wage of £5 and 10 shillings, and his wife was working as a counterhand in a greengrocer's shop. And they lived ordinary working class lives until Sir Garnet died in Canada in 1991. And since then, nobody knows who the 13th baronet is. He's probably a man who's living in Texas, but he can't prove his family tree. It's just so difficult to untangle. But that's the sort of person who was a curate in this parish long ago.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for that enthralling piece of history about our village here, and beautiful, lovely story. I always, in our discussions with Patrick, talk about the richness that comes in society from diversity, and I just love that myself. I always have done that, I think that we're really fortunate in our own locality here that we have such varied, rich history here in where we come from. So thank you for that. Now, coming to the end of part one, but not before what we have is a real lovely treat for you. This guy is 15 and his name is Barry Fitzgerald, and I first heard him playing the saxophone at his great-granddad's funeral that Amanda spoke about earlier this year. He has been playing the saxophone just for a year and a half. He's a student at the CBS in the Green in Tralee. His favourite music is jazz. Barry attends the David Rath's School of Music in Tralee. He is going to take us to this beautiful piece of music that he played before, which is a real favourite of mine, called Summertime. And I think he's likes me to say he's going to dedicate it like then to his great granddad, Pat O'Keen. As I said, he's a prolific outdoor enthusiast, a key swimmer, loves rowing, and a super saxophone player. Barry, it's all over to you. Welcome back to part 2 of our 9th poetry reading here from St. Brendan's Church in Kilnocton, as it was originally called, on the Steeple Road in Tarbert in County Kerry. Hope you really enjoyed the first part of our reading, and the second part, which we're running out a little bit later than the first part. We'll also carry you through some poetry, some music, song. So without any further ado, I'm going to welcome back our host for today, Reverend Canon Patrick Comerford, to tell us the story about the O'Hanlon. Thanks, Patrick.
I don't know what you thought about my first story about the Reverend Sir William Augustus Woolsey, but it's certainly a good way of illustrating how most of the rectors and the curates and the priests here certainly didn't fit into the stereotype on television of the Morty Vicar type of clergyman. There was another curious title that was held by one of the priests who worked in this parish. And the title of baronet, as I was saying, gave William Augustus Woolsey the right to put the word Sir in front of his name. But there was another priest in this group of parishes who used an ancient Gaelic title just to show you how different the priests here were. He was the Reverend Dr. Alexander Patrick Hanlon, and he actually called himself the O'Hanlon, meaning that he regarded himself as the chief of the O'Hanlon clan. He was born in Milltown Malbay in County Clare, the son of a local Catholic farmer, Patrick Hanlon, and he probably became a member of the Church of Ireland through contact with the Dingle Mission around the middle of the 1840s. Not quite sure about those dates and those details, But in any case, by the time he went as a mature student to Trinity College Dublin in 1839, he was then in his mid-20s, and he graduated with the degree BA in 1844. He was then ordained a deacon in 1846 by the Bishop of Killaloe, but for the Diocese of Ardfert, which in the Church of Ireland is the same as the Diocese of Kerry, and then became a priest in 1847. And in this group of parishes, he was sent as a curate for 2 years to a small area known as Murher. It's about 4.5 miles south of Tarbert, and the main village that was then growing up around there was the planned town of Newtown Sands or Moyvane. Hanlon, though, seems to have lived in Ballylongford, and he worked in the group of parishes in this part of northeast Kerry, and during his time here he was praised for his unremitting and his constant work with local people in their suffering during the Great Famine in the 1840s. He freely distributed milk, bread, medicine, worked with the orphans and the elderly, and it was said at the time, not a house in which fever is to be found, and they are the greater in number, but he visits in person. After his time in Ballylongford, Hanlon moved to parish ministry in other parts of Ireland, County Meath and County Tyrone, in Mount Shannon on the shores of Lough Derg in his native County Clare, to Waterford and to County Longford. And it seems that at one stage, as he was moving around different parishes in the Church of Ireland, that he thought about returning to Kerry when there was a vacancy in the parish in 1864. Certainly, he visited the parish during that vacancy, but his wife, who was swimming with their children, suffered an epileptic attack as she was swimming in Dingle Harbour. She was rescued, the children were rescued, but she died soon after, and she was buried in St. James's Churchyard in Dingle. So Hanlon stayed on in Mount Shannon for another few years. He gained 2 more degrees from Trinity College Dublin, including a doctorate in laws in 1865. And yet, in a speech in 1867, he defended his work with the Irish Society and the Irish Church Missions, 2 evangelical mission agencies, pointing out that despite the reputation that those agencies had 20 years earlier with the famine, that he had no antagonism, no antipathy towards his Roman Catholic neighbours, their church, and that indeed many of his family, friends and neighbours were Catholics, and that he was quite proud of his background. He married a second time in 1871, married a woman from County Waterford, and eventually, when he was about to retire, he was feted at a garden party in Dugert, organised by the Achill Mission, which had been founded by the Reverend Edward Nangle. When he died in 1898 at the age of 84, he was buried in the ruins of Kilwatermoy Church out near Tallow in West Waterford, in an area that I spent some of my early childhood. It's very curious that Hanlon, who came from that background, who claimed to be the chief of the O'Hanlons and used the title the O'Hanlon, was a contemporary, a near contemporary of another man who also claimed the same title and who was also a Church of Ireland priest in these dioceses. The Reverend William Hanlon, who worked in these dioceses, also claimed the title of the O'Hanlon. And he was a doctor's son from Portarlington and was ordained deacon in 1874 and priest in 1875. And he came to the Diocese of Ardfert as the rector of a parish called Drumtariff. It's between Kanturk and Mill Street, but at that time it was in the Diocese of Ardfert, and it's still in the Catholic Church in the Diocese of Kerry. Hanlon's father was a doctor, and eventually Hanlon claimed the title of the O'Hanlon and registered his claims in Dublin Castle in a very bizarre pedigree, which he compiled to support his claims. And in that family tree, he said that his lineal ancestor had given St. Patrick the site on which St. Patrick's Cathedral was built. Hanlon became an honorary chaplain to the Lord Lieutenant and eventually died in 1916, 2 days after the Easter Rising broke out in Dublin. Now, these family trees all sound a bit bizarre, they sound a bit fantastic, because indeed the last person to hold the title of the O'Hanlon was a rapparee, an Irish rebel in the 17th century, Redmond O'Hanlon, who called himself the Count. He failed to recover the O'Hanlon lands around Newry and Dundalk when Charles II was restored to the throne in 1660, and eventually Redmond O'Hanlon was caught as a rapparee, was shot, had his head severed, and his severed head was displayed on a pike outside the jail in Downpatrick. His family later dug up his body and brought it to be buried in Letterkenny in County Donegal. Now, I think that Newry and Carlingford and Letterkenny are a long way from Portarlington and Mount Shannon and from Tarbert and Ballylongford. But that's the assault of eccentric priest that we had in this parish at the end of the 19th century.
Patrick, thank you so much for that. Another wonderful, wonderful story about our heritage and what happened here in Tarbert. Thank you for that. Now, where are we on my... Yeah, we're back with another poem from Amanda. One that she says was written on the 14th of May this year, in the middle of the lockdown, at a well, one of those holy wells, I think, that Amanda loves to frequent, at Tubbernamolt, if I'm correctly, in near Outfert or in Outfert. So I'm going to hand you over to Amanda to take you through that poem.
Thank you, Paddy. So this poem was written, as Paddy said, at Tubbernamolt Well on the 14th of May. And when I arrived at the well, the last time I would have been there would have been shortly after my grandfather passed away. So there was a longing in me to go to the well. And when I arrived at the well that evening, the well was very empty. So it reminded me of how empty all of us are during this lockdown. But as human beings, how empty we need to be to fill up again. So there's always reflections in nature. Time for reflection. Time for reflection. Time to belong. Time to empty. Time to sing a blessed song. Time to feel that sun that shines down upon your skin. Time to feel the fire that's warming the belly and the womb. Time for belonging. Time to let go. Time for hope. And a time to empty. A time to pause. A time to belong. Time to renew. Time to sing a song. Time to feel the feet on the earth. Time to feel the beat of your heart. Time to beam a smile on your face. Time to feel the warmth of the sun. Time to hear the song of the robin. Time to appreciate the beauty of nature. Time to pause. Time to reflect. A time to cry and a time to let go. A time to be full of joy. A time to be strong. A time to be grounded. A time to sing a precious song. A time to take a walk on the land. A time to step with your toes and your feet. A time to feel the rhythm and your beat. time to feel the kiss of your lips, time to open your eyes that shine, time to feel the energy that you are, time to hold your arms out wide, time to feel you are a child, time to know that you belong, time to know you're singing your song, a time to be, a time to belong, a time to empty, a time to be strong, a time to let go of all the times and the timelines, a time to show, a time to grow, a time to heal, a time to belong, a time to sense and a time to be strong, a time to feel your heartbeat getting stronger and stronger, a time to know that you belong, a time to plant those seeds in the earth, a time to pause, a time to reflect, a time to go within, a time to be still, a time to know you're a child of great will, a time to smile, a time to cry, a time to hug, a time to fly, a time to smile, a time to renew, a time to reflect upon the who, a time to feel the breath within, a time to move, to grow, to be, belong. Belong, my child, upon this earth, roots strong, branches blossoming, a time to feel your bark, the bark of your tree, how strong that you are, a time to connect with your land and your tribe, a time to know that you are wise, a time to feel all those before, a time to know that you have their score, as they galore and they assist, and they give you hope, and you know that you have roots, and from those roots you'll spring out, my dear. You'll take a giant step, you'll be able to hear the sound of the birds singing, the sound of your soul, the sound of the earth humming, the sound of your call. And so you may connect with the earth. You know in your heart.
Thanks again, Amanda. Beautiful, beautiful words, and how relevant, how absolutely relevant to where we're at today. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Now, so we're moving swiftly along, as they say. Every time I walk in here, it brings back many memories, and we had some fantastic nights here. We've had carol services, we've had concerts, we've had wonderful monologues. But when I look across over here beside me, I see the organ. And of course, even before I came in here myself, because I was obviously missing from Tarbert for I think 30 odd years, right? Mother used to play here, particularly at Christmas time for the carol service. So there's always that little touch of nostalgia. So I want to do the next piece around that, really. But I also have to say that my friend here behind the camera, Dave O'Gorman, has been with me since we started this mad stuff, I don't know, 9 weeks ago now, and I know we're coming up, this is our second last, and we're going to finish next Thursday, right? Now that we're getting into stage 3. but he has been with me through thick and thin and all times of the day and morning times, and without his professionalism in terms of recording this from a phone, right, we wouldn't have got to where we are today. There's a strange connection, I suppose, which I just mentioned to Dave, is that his mother Christina passed away in February 2015. Mother had got seriously ill a couple of weeks before that and passed away shortly afterwards on the 4th of May of 2015. So we passed through COVID and all that, their 5th anniversary. So I'm going to do this piece called Eagle's Wings, and I'm going to dedicate it to both Mother and indeed David's mother, Christina O'Gorman. And he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. You who dwell in the shelter of the Lord, who abide in his shadow for life, say to the Lord, my refuge, my rock, in whom I trust, and we will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. You need not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, though thousands fall about you, near you it shall not come. And he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand, and hold you in the palm of his hand. Anyway, that's especially for Mother Creedon and Mother O'Gorman. I'm now going to give the last words to our host, Reverend Canon Patrick Comerford, just to say a few words.
Well, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed our programme. I hope you've enjoyed your virtual visit to St. Brendan's, Connaughton. And I hope that your next visit here will not be a virtual one, but will be a real one, that you'll come back here, feel that you're welcome, feel that it's part of your story, your community, and your heritage. I've often said that churches are appropriate places where we should read poetry, tell stories, have a little bit of drama, listen to the music. Because the search for beauty in the arts is the same as the religious quest. Some of the great poets, T.S. Eliot and John Betjeman, were really in their hearts trying to reach the great religious truths. And the search for truth should not be limited by narrative that seeks just to describe facts and history, as if the Bible were only news and as if religion was only about facts that could be set down on letters of stone. Indeed, the quest for truth and for beauty and for meaning in life that goes beyond our own temporal existence is a search and a quest that is shared by the arts and by true religion. So You're always welcome in St. Brendan's in that quest. May we journey together. May we be pilgrims together. And may we share truths together. Thank you for being with us this time.
Thank you so much, Patrick, and again, thank you for your hospitality and warm welcome today. So the last piece of music, Barry is going to treat us to what he calls In a Sentimental Mood. And so I'll give it over to Barry for the last piece of music. So that brings us to the end of our readings, parts 1 and 2. All that's left for me to say is to Patrick, thank you so much for your contributions and wonderful, wonderful welcome and hospitality as always. Amanda, so much thank you. Just absolutely moving and beautiful. Barry, what can I say? I hope we've launched a new career, that's all I hope. Here in Tarbert. To my good cameraman here, who's been holding this up over his head for the last, how long, David, thank you so much, right? Slán agus beannacht, we're back again for the last poetry reading next Thursday. I'll just leave you with that, I suppose that Irish saying that came strongly to mind when we were creating this and more today. It says, Ní cart go cur le céile, ní cart go cur le céile, there is no strength without unity. So with that, I'll leave you. Slán agus beannacht.